I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here. Privileged. God has been lighting a fire in my heart for the past 2 or 3 months. I have no clue where that is taking me or where God is preparing me to go. Share these things with you, not bragging, but to show you that God is still a God of miracles. I used to be a youth pastor. And in our church at Bowie, quite a few of our men are and were in the oil field. And therefore, in the youth ministry, we dealt mostly with their wives because the men were always gone. 2 weeks at a time, they were gone all the time. And I saw the burden on the hearts of the mothers and the absence of the fathers. And so it's hard when you're surrounded by the devil to come home and not bring him with you. Does that make any sense? And I was burdened. How long has it been since I was a youth pastor, Aaron? 6, 8 years? So, this is maybe 10 years ago. And God put a burden on my heart then to figure out a way to bring the Bible to the oil field. These guys are there, let's go, I'll drive, of course, that was for oil was $30 a barrel, but it was booming up there around Bowie, so these rigs were everywhere, and you go up there, and I knew these guys. These guys were company men. They were the head honchos on the site. So I could pull up and talk to the guard shed and say, hey, I'm going to go see so-and-so. And they'd give me my hard hat and stuff. We'd go in there. I could go anywhere I wanted. And I tried. And I would go out there and visit these guys. And I did everything I could do to try to get it. And it just never would happen. I couldn't get it to work. So a few years ago, I got into the oil field myself. And spent some time down in Midland, and then was on a rig and was gone from my family 2 weeks at a time. Got to witness to some of the guys in the oil field. Got to witness to some of the guys that were on the rig with me, and it's got to see firsthand. And the oil field's kind of like I don't know if any of y'all here have any experience with it, but oil field's kind of like almost like a club. Okay, if you ain't in it, you don't know. If that makes sense. And so, at the time, I didn't know what God was doing. I thought I had a good job. I was making good money. I thought that was what God was doing. No. So all God was doing was making me a member of the club. So then one day I was getting ready to go on my hitch. My family can attest to this. It was always hard to leave. It was hard to go 2 weeks and be gone. It was hard. But this time is different. This time it was just different. And so, tears are shed, and we say our goodbyes, and I get in the truck, and I'm headed to Midland. And I get 45 minutes away from Midland, and the entire way, me and God are just going at it. He's telling me, I'm going, no. God, you don't make any sense. What you're telling me to do don't make any sense. I can't go to my wife and say, this is what I want you to do. She's going to hit me in the head with a ball bat. I can't tell her that. Come up with something else. Finally, I pulled over, down there a minute, got in a Walmart parking lot, and I just sat there. My shift started in 45 minutes. And I'm just sitting in the parking lot, literally, behind the steering wheel going, And it was almost like God stood in front of my pickup and put his hand on the hood of my truck and goes, you ain't going. So I got on the phone and I called my tool pusher and I said, I know what this looks like. I know I told you when I got hired that I'm a Christian. And I'm going to give you everything I got. And I know this contradicts all of that. But I got a man standing outside my pickup that looks an awful lot like God, and he's telling me to go home. And I'm sorry, but I quit. And I got in the truck, and I drove home. And I'm on my phone going, so what do I tell Aaron? And so after I prayed for a while, I got on the phone. Beep, beep, beep. Hey, babe, guess what? Got good news and bad news. Which one do you want? Good news is I'm coming home. Bad news is I don't have a job. So I came home. And there's a company there in Bowie, EOG Resources, and I have been applying there for 2 years. Nothing ever happened. So I go and I come home. We're begging God. So Aaron gets on it. I can take a computer, okay, and I can throw it out the front door. That's my computer skills. So I give it to Erin, and she goes in all these places, starts applying online. Okay, phone rings. Halliburton wants me to come to Pampa for an interview. I happen to know somebody in Pampa. Kind of tall, kind of ugly. No, not my dad, my brother Joel. And so I go up there to see him. And I said, listen, I don't know if God's wanting me to get back in the youth ministry. I don't know what he's doing, but he gave me, so I'm thinking, man, this is God working it out. This is God, I go up there to interview with Halliburton. It goes great, and I preach at Joel's church, and we get, we're looking around. We think God's going to maybe send us to Pampa and work with my brother. That'd be awesome. As much as I make fun of him, we get along great. We work great together. And Halliburton never called back. So I'm thinking, next thing you know, phone rings. A kid who had gone to summer camp with us when I was a youth pastor, who now works for EOG, calls me and says, go up to the office and talk to Jim Klein. They're hiring. I've turned in dozens and dozens of resumes. Jim Klein's cousin and aunt are some of our dearest friends in church. So I'm thinking, I got a family connection. I'm in. I've been applying to this guy for 2 years. And he says, go talk to Jim Klein. So I go in, and I talk to Jim. Get an interview. Interview goes great. Go home. Don't have a clue. Sunday, Raymond calls me. Because I don't know how it happened. It was somehow through the interview process, I didn't give Jim my phone number. So Raymond calls me and says, can you be at work Monday morning? Yup. So I go sit down in Jim Klein's office Monday morning. I got the job. The job I've been trying to get for 2 years. I'm home every night. I work 7 days and I'm off 4. Then I work 7 more days and I'm off 2. It's just a dream. I sit out in front of Jim and he interviewed me, and again, please, I don't mean this to be bragging, but he looks at me and he says, okay, tell me about the job and stuff. I said, before you get anywhere else, I want you to understand something. I just quit a job making twice what I make here to do what God wants me to do. So before I start, I want you to know I got to do whatever I got to do to be in church every Sunday. And he tells me, he said, well, here's what you got to do. He said, you start your day, and then you stop, and you go to church. And then when you spend time with your family, eat lunch with your family, whenever you're done, go finish your day. And if anybody has a problem with that, you tell them, come talk to me. That's God. I now have a Bible study every Monday morning at EOG. Share scripture verses every single day throughout the company, EOG. I have got my mission in the oil field. God has allowed me to bring God to the oil field. Now, I'll spend some time in Sunday school tenderizing you a little bit. And there's going to be a little bit of hard stuff coming here this morning. And holy smokes, I'm going to have to hurry up. But Genesis chapter number 22. Okay, Genesis chapter number 22. I have got an introduction here, the title of my message. Brother Hugh has done his computer magic. I don't even know what that's called, okay, to let you know. So, but anyway, the words that I got here are going to be up there. So, but I've got this big old long introduction that I typed out. It's all pretty. See, it's all like organized and stuff. And I didn't say a word of it. But anyway, in Genesis chapter number 22, all right? Now, give you a little bit of background. This is the story of Abraham and Isaac. Now, 2 chapters before, in Genesis chapter 20, okay, Abraham is going in and he's like, okay, now Sarah, listen, okay? You are drop dead gorgeous, okay? I love you, honey. Okay, you're beautiful. But these guys, they're a bunch of crazy people. So when we go in here, tell them you're my sister. Because you're too hot for them to be able to handle it. They won't be able to take it. And one of them's going to want to marry you, and I don't want them to kill me. So you're my sister, okay? Now first, what if they did? I mean, how would things have been different if one of those guys took her? Now, of course, Abimelech tried, and God prevented him and everything. But I want you to understand the lack of faith that Abraham had 2 chapters ago. Then we jump in Genesis chapter 22. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, clave the wood for the burnt offering, rose up and went to the place with which God had told him. And then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood and the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire from his hand, and a knife, and they both of them went together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham, and said, Father. And he said, Here I am, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar, and there laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him upon the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took a knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him in heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thy hand upon thy lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing then that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by the horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering, and instead of his son, and Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah-Jireh, as it is to say, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, then in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned with his young men, and they rose up, and they went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt in Beersheba. The title of my message this morning is Rise Up. So we look at verses 1 through 10. I have a special place in my heart for teenagers. And I have been burdened for this church for a couple of years. And I have been praying that God would raise somebody up to help work with y'all's teenagers. And on the way, this morning, I came in here, nobody was here, and I kneeled at this altar, and I asked God, I said, God, I want somebody to rise up today. I had no idea about the announcement about having a meeting after church to work with the youth, work with the kids. I had no clue. But I asked God for somebody to rise up today. Kids don't need Six Flags and haunted houses. They need somebody they can trust. They need somebody who can love. They need somebody who will be real. They don't need a scholar. They don't need Walt Disney. They just need love. There's going to be a meeting down here after church. Somebody in this room needs to rise up. Genesis, God gave Abraham a challenge. Now, originally, when I did this outline, I had 24 points. And I showed it to my wife, and I went, that's not going to work. I mean, if I was preaching for a month, maybe, but okay. So I narrowed it down to 3, okay? All right? So started up, number 1, okay? Talking about Moses here, he gave up, okay? Now we look down through verse number 1 through 10, and we can go down through here, all right? And God, verses 1 and 2, God is telling him what he has to do with Isaac. But the first thing I want to jump in and really focus on in verse number 3, okay, is right then, right there, right now, Moses rose up early in the morning. Now, when did God tell him to sacrifice Isaac? Verse number 2. Take. When? Now. When is it time to rise up? Now. Abraham rose up early in the morning and got busy. Isaac was his everything. Isaac was the promise of God. Isaac was his future. Isaac was everything to Abraham. Abraham was nothing without the future of Isaac. God says, kill him. I talked about dealing with sin this morning in Sunday school. Now I'm going to really point the finger. We all have an Isaac. We all have something in our life that is mine. And I don't know if I'm the person to do it. All I know is the words God gave me to give, so I'm giving them. But we got to get the Isaac and be willing to give it up. Or we're going to stay in our pews with nothing going on. We all have an Isaac. We all have, the real stuff. I want to get rid of all the other stuff, and I want to get to your Isaac. God says, take your Isaac and kill it. Because in that moment, up to this point, what was Abraham's focus? What was Abraham's dream? Isaac. What is God telling Abraham? I am your dream. Not Isaac. Me. Sometimes, I heard a preacher say the other day, he said, sometimes we get so focused on the blessing of God that we forget about the blesser. We're so focused on the blessing that we forget about who's giving it to us. I am so thankful for what God has blessed me with. I'm so thankful for the doors that God has opened. But I don't want to be so focused on the doors that God has opened that I forget about the guy that's got the key. A door only works if it's unlocked. Right? Unless you're trying to do what? Keep somebody out. Don't keep your door locked to God this morning when we're talking. Okay? God's speaking to your heart. Rise up now. Okay? So Moses gave up. He gave up complete obedience, complete faith, complete sacrifice. Okay? If you look at it, Moses, he didn't hold nothing back. He rose up immediately. He went out and he got the wood. He got the donkeys ready. He got some men. He had no idea how long this journey was going to be, but he prepared. He got ready, everything. He was completely gave everything up. Let's go. Second point, he lifted up. Let's look at verse number 11. Now, Abraham goes, he sees it afar off, he goes up to the mountain, he gets everything ready, okay? And I want you to picture this, okay? You're taking your son. I mean, if you really want to look at it, a lot of times we don't realize the detail of the Bible. But, Abraham raises his knife up, and I think in our minds, we picture that he's just going to, if it would have went through with it, he's just going to kill him, and then God raised him up from the dead. Go back in the Old Testament. Go back and look and study the detail of a sacrifice. Okay? He was about to do that to his son. And he raises his hand. He goes, everything there. I was in a hospital room one time. Teenage boy, dying of cancer. Looks at his dad and says, Dad, is this going to kill me? Isaac looks at Abraham and goes, Dad, where's the lamb? Do you think Abraham going up to this, answering that question to his son, do you think fulfilling and obeying and doing what God asked him to do, was that easy? God will provide himself a lamb. Verse number 11, Abraham lifted up. Verse number 11, and the angel of the Lord called up to heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon thy lad, neither do anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. Now, I don't know about y'all. We used to do show goats for the show. Abby was my little goat herder, okay? The goats despised my presence. They did everything in the world they could to make me beat them to death. Abby could just go out there and just, okay, and whatever. Okay, drive me crazy. You grab a hold of that goat, and you grab it by the horns, and you hold it down, and you got to trim its hooves, or put a tag in its ear, or pull it back, and I can't tell how many times legs are crossed like this. I got a goat head between my legs, and I'm holding it, and Aaron's trying to give it worm medicine or something. That ram caught in the thicket, just sitting there. I mean, he's not sitting there with the, trying to tie Isaac up. Man, I wish that dadgum ram would shut up. He's over here. No, nothing. Until he completed his obedience. Then the ram showed up. Abraham lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, the ram. Now, one of the cool things about this, okay, and I got to get through this fast, okay? Turn over real quick to John chapter 8, verse 56. This is just like they say in Boston, this is wicked awesome, okay? All right? Okay? And John chapter 8, okay, and verse 56. John 8, verse 56 says, Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. You know what's really cool about Mount Moriah? It's right at 300 meters from Golgotha. And when Abraham lifted up his eyes, according to John chapter 8, verse 56, God not only showed him the ram, he showed him Jesus. And the sacrifice that Jesus was going to make. You don't know what God will reveal to you when you obey him completely. When you give up your Isaac. Can you imagine revealing the cross? What a privilege. And it says Abraham saw it and he was glad. Yeah. And then look what happens afterwards, okay? Let's finish up, okay? Verses 15 through 19. I just turned off from Genesis chapter 22, okay? But in verses 15 through 19, okay, we get to see what happens, okay, because of his obedience. And the angel of the Lord, of course, understand too, in the Old Testament, when it's talking about the angel of the Lord, it's talking about Jesus, okay? So Jesus is talking, okay? And it says, and the Lord, the angel of the Lord called on Abraham from the heaven the second time. He said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and multiplying I will multiply thy seed, the stars of the heaven, and the sand of the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of thine enemies, and the seed of thy nations of the earth shall be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice, okay? So, God not only blessed Abraham, God not only gave him Isaac back, God showed him Jesus, God blessed him, and multiplied it, and blessed him some more. God went ahead of him and defeated all of his enemies and said, I'm going to give you their gates. And whoever blesses you will be blessed. Whoever curses you will be cursed. I got you. And Abraham named the place Jehovah Jireh. And it says, on the mountain of God it shall be seen. That also means on the mountain of God, God will provide. But you've got to take your Isaac to the top of that mountain and give it up first. You can't be walking in the valley of the shadow of death and expect God to provide. You've got to dig deep. You've got to get inside of you and see, what is my Isaac? What is God saying? And you're going, like I did in that pickup, going, not this. This is mine. It's hard. Those devils get in there and they worm their way in like a cancer and they grab hold. And when you rip them out, it's going to hurt. But what if God shows you Golgotha? 3 questions, and I'm done. First one, are you fed up? This year, how many of y'all watched any Cowboy games this year? Anybody? Anybody watch Cowboy games? Okay. And they would like tease you, like they were kind of maybe going to get it together. And then somebody get hurt, or they'd fumble, or interception, and it's like, oh, come on, not again. And then you got kids in the house, flip it over SpongeBob or something. You know, got fed up. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired. I'm fed up of just showing up. I'm fed up with just being. I want God to bless me. I want God to bless me upon blessing. I want God to bless my kids. I want God to grab my enemies by the throat, choke them out, and hand me their gates. But He ain't going to do it until you give up your Isaac. We want to come to church, put our Isaac in our pocket and go, that's mine, bless me. And sometimes you get a little holy tickle. And you're satisfied with that and you go home. I don't want to tickle. I want God to show me His mountain. I want God to make me raise up. I can't tolerate just existing anymore. Going through the motions. Why? Why did Christ come? According to Him, He says, I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. He ain't telling you I've showed up so you could have millions, so you could be happy and there's rainbows and gumdrops everywhere. He said, I want you to have life. Who is life? Him. That you might have life and not just exist, abundant, conquering, living. Number 2, will you give up? Abraham gave up. He said, you tell me to kill him, God, I'm going to go kill him. You got it. I'm raising a knife. And you notice he wasn't doing this. All right? Anytime, God. Right? How do I know that? What did he have to do when the angel of the Lord called out to him? What did he have to do? He had to lift his head up, right? Isn't that what it says? Abraham lifted up his eyes, right? So that tells me that he wasn't looking around. He was looking at his son he was fixing to kill right in the eye. And God cried out and said, stop! I want to bless you. I've got a sacrifice. You showed me you're willing. What did Christ do for us? The Bible said his visage was marred more than any man, more than anything Hollywood can cook up. Nothing's gory enough. The research says that the whipping that he took with a cat of nine tails was going to be such that the flesh was going to be removed from his back to the point where you could see his internal organs. That's what the cross was resting on as he drug it through town. He hung on the cross, looked around, and said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. What do you give up? What are you willing to put on the cross? An experience what the thief experienced when he said, hey, buddy, guess where you and me are going today? McDonald's? No. Paradise. You and me. One-way ticket, buddy. Last question, and I'm done. Will you rise up? There are people in this building. There are people in your life. Husbands, wives, kids, grandkids. They need somebody to rise up and show them the way. There's an opportunity in this church. What is the kingdom of heaven made up of? Children. Didn't Jesus say, of such is the kingdom of heaven? You've got an opportunity here in a minute. Whatever the devil is whispering in your ear, telling you why you can't, leave it on the mountain. And let God use you. And give up your Isaac. And whether it's with these kids, or in your own life, or in your own family, or in your co-workers at work, I am a living, breathing example that your head is not going to explode and your life won't end if you talk about God at work. I had a guy at work email me and say, hey, my sister's having open heart surgery. Please pray. And so I said, hey, I'll pray. I promise. Pray right now. Then I got to thinking. I said, wait a minute. I can do better than that. So I emailed him back. And I said, I happen to know this guy. He's tall, a little bit rough around the edges, a little bit sketchy. Overall, pretty good guy. He lives in Grand Prairie. Happens to be my dad. I know that if I call him, he'll go by the hospital and see your sister and hold her hand and pray with her, face to face. Would that be okay? So I called my dad. Dad goes up there, and he holds her hand, and he prays. That's what God does. What will you let him do with you? We're going to close, have the instruments play, and we're going to sing a word of closing.